The champagne glass slipped from Elena's hand, shattering against the marble floor of the Grand Ballroom at the Four Seasons. The sound cut through the corporate chatter like a gunshot, and 200 faces turned to stare at the visibly pregnant woman standing frozen beneath the crystal chandelier. Marcus Chen stood on the stage, his hands still raised mid-gesture, his expression a carefully crafted mixture of regret and determination that Elena recognized as pure theater. Behind him, the massive screen displayed Chen Digital Solutions' quarterly results, numbers that Elena had personally compiled during late nights at the office while her back ached and her swollen feet throbbed. "As I was saying," Marcus continued, his voice carrying that smooth confidence that had first attracted her 7 years ago. "We're restructuring our marketing department to better align with our growth trajectory. Elena Chen's position has been eliminated, effective immediately." The words hit like physical blows. Eliminated. Immediately. Her married name, the one she'd taken to hide who she really was, now being used to strip away the last shred of dignity she'd been clinging to. Elena's hand moved instinctively to her rounded belly. 8 months of pregnancy making her feel vulnerable and exposed in the cocktail dress that no longer fit quite right. The baby kicked hard, as if protesting the injustice of the moment. "Marcus," she started, her voice barely audible above the uncomfortable murmurs rippling through the crowd. "This isn't personal, Elena." He smiled down at her from the stage, and she saw something cruel flicker in his dark eyes. "It's business. Surely you understand that after 7 years in the industry, if you're already hooked by this story of ultimate betrayal, hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love hearing from you all around the world." Vanessa Lee emerged from the wings, her designer heels clicking against the stage floor with predatory precision. At 26, she was everything Elena wasn't anymore. Slim, perfectly groomed, wearing a dress that probably cost more than Elena's monthly salary had been. Her hand rested possessively on Marcus's arm as she leaned into the microphone. "We're excited to announce that I'll be stepping into an expanded role," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with false sympathy as she looked directly at Elena. "Someone needs to handle the real work, while others are otherwise occupied." The implication hung in the air like poison. Elena felt heat flood her face as colleagues she'd worked alongside for 3 years refused to meet her eyes. Some looked uncomfortable. Most looked relieved it wasn't them on the chopping block. "You can't do this," Elena said, her voice stronger now despite the trembling in her hands. "I have a contract. I have rights. I'm 8 months pregnant with your child, Marcus." "Had a contract," Marcus corrected, descending from the stage with Vanessa trailing behind him like a shadow. "Your employment agreement includes a termination clause that allows for restructuring. My lawyers assure me everything is perfectly legal." He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that Elena could smell his cologne. The same scent that used to comfort her, now making her stomach turn. Behind him, Vanessa's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Besides," Marcus continued, his voice dropping to a tone that only those immediately nearby could hear, "you knew this was coming. You've been dead weight for months, Elena. Waddling around the office, taking constant breaks, leaving early for doctor's appointments. This company needs people who are committed, not distracted by—" His eyes flicked to her belly with barely concealed disgust. "Personal complications." Elena felt something crack inside her chest. 7 years of marriage. 7 years of supporting his dreams, editing his presentations at midnight, entertaining his clients while pregnant and exhausted. 7 years of being Elena Chen, the supportive wife who'd abandoned her own identity to build his empire with him. "Personal complications," she repeated slowly. "Is that what you're calling our baby?" "I'm calling it what it is." a situation that no longer aligns with my professional goals. Marcus pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket, his movements precise and rehearsed. Which brings me to the second matter we need to discuss. The envelope was cream-colored, expensive cardstock with a law firm's return address. Elena didn't need to open it to know what it contained. She'd seen enough divorce papers in movies, heard enough horror stories from friends. But she'd never imagined standing in a ballroom full of colleagues and industry partners, 8 months pregnant, while her husband handed her the official end of their marriage. "You're serving me divorce papers at a company event?" Her voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. "In front of everyone?" "I believe in transparency," Marcus replied. "And efficiency. This kills 2 birds with 1 stone, so to speak." Vanessa laughed, a sound like wind chimes made of razors. She stepped closer, her perfume overwhelming in its sweetness, and Elena saw something vicious flash across her perfectly made-up face. "Oh, Elena, don't be so dramatic," Vanessa said, loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "Marcus is actually being quite generous. He could have fired you weeks ago, but he waited until after the quarterly results were in. He's even offering you severance despite your performance issues." "Performance issues?" Elena's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "I've exceeded every metric for 3 years running." "Metrics that I actually compiled," Vanessa interjected smoothly. "You were just the name on the reports. Everyone here knows who really does the work in marketing." The lie was so brazen, so perfectly delivered, that Elena saw several colleagues nodding in agreement. Vanessa had been laying groundwork for months, she realized. Taking credit in meetings, positioning herself as the invaluable talent, while painting Elena as the pregnant burden dragging the team down. Marcus checked his Rolex with theatrical impatience. "Elena, I have a room full of investors waiting. Sign the papers so we can move on with our lives." "Our lives?" Elena's voice cracked. "Marcus, I'm carrying your child. We're married. We have a home together, a history." "Had a home." Past tense. He gestured toward the ballroom's entrance, where 2 security guards in black suits had materialized like sharks, sensing blood in the water. "I've already moved your belongings to a storage unit. The house is being sold. The joint accounts are frozen pending the divorce settlement." The floor seemed to tilt beneath Elena's feet. "You moved my things? You froze our accounts?" "My accounts," Marcus corrected. "My house, my company. You seem to have forgotten that everything you've enjoyed for the past 7 years came from my success, my hard work, my vision." Vanessa pressed against Marcus's side, her hand sliding to rest on his chest in a gesture of unmistakable possession. "Marcus and I have been discussing the future. We think it's best if you're not lingering around, making things awkward." "How long?" Elena asked quietly, though she already knew the answer from the way they moved together, the practiced intimacy of their body language. "How long have you 2 been? Does it matter?" Marcus's tone suggested profound boredom with the conversation. "Elena, you stopped being my wife in any meaningful sense months ago. You became this—" He waved vaguely at her pregnant form. "This thing that cried all the time and couldn't fit into decent clothes. Vanessa understands what I need. She matches my ambition." The cruelty was breathtaking in its casualness. Elena looked around the ballroom at the faces of people she'd considered friends, colleagues, allies. No one met her eyes. No one stepped forward to object or defend her. They were all too busy protecting their own positions, their own relationships with Marcus Chen, the Golden Boy CEO whose company was supposedly worth $200 million. "Marcus, please," Elena tried one more time, hating herself for begging, but thinking of the baby, thinking of having nowhere to go and no access to money. At least wait until after the baby is born. Let me have some dignity. Dignity? Vanessa laughed again. Honey, you lost that when you decided to trap Marcus with a pregnancy. Did you really think a baby would keep him interested? The accusation hung in the air, and Elena saw the narrative Vanessa had constructed. The desperate older wife trying to trap her successful husband with an unwanted pregnancy. Never mind that Marcus had been the one who'd wanted to start a family, who'd convinced Elena to stop taking birth control, who'd talked about legacy and dynasty and building something that would outlast them both. I need you to leave now, Marcus said, his voice taking on an edge of impatience. He nodded to the security guards. Gentlemen, please escort Mrs. Chen from the premises. She's no longer employed here and is no longer welcome at company events. The guards approached with professional detachment, their hands hovering near Elena's elbows without quite touching. She looked down at the divorce papers, still clutched in her hand, at the champagne soaking into her shoes from the glass she'd dropped, at the faces of 200 people watching her humiliation with various degrees of discomfort and fascination. I'll sign them, she said quietly. But not here. Not like this. Sign them now, or I'll have you removed for trespassing, Marcus replied. Your choice, Elena. Vanessa produced a pen with a flourish, holding it out with exaggerated courtesy. Here, let's make this easy. Elena took the pen with shaking hands. The baby was kicking frantically now, as if sensing her mother's distress. She thought about fighting, about refusing, about making them physically drag her out. But what was the point? Marcus had orchestrated this perfectly. The public firing, the divorce papers, the frozen accounts, the moved belongings. He'd left her with nothing except the clothes on her back and the child in her belly. She signed her name on the indicated lines, each signature feeling like a small death. Marcus Chen. The name she'd taken 7 years ago when she'd been young and stupid and in love. The name that had helped her hide from her real identity, her real family, her real power. Excellent, Marcus said, taking the papers and handing them to Vanessa, who tucked them into her clutch with obvious satisfaction. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a celebration to get back to. Gentlemen? The security guards each took one of Elena's arms, their grips firm but not quite painful. They began steering her toward the ballroom's exit, and Elena felt every eye in the room tracking her progress. The pregnant woman being escorted out like a criminal, like a problem solved, like something that had outlived its usefulness. As they reached the doors, Elena heard Vanessa's voice carry across the ballroom. Now, where were we? Oh, yes. Marcus was about to announce our engagement. The applause that erupted behind her was like daggers in Elena's back. She stumbled, and the security guards tightened their grip, practically carrying her now through the ornate corridors of the Four Seasons. Other hotel guests stared as they passed, seeing a pregnant woman being forcibly removed, their expressions ranging from concern to judgment. They deposited her on the sidewalk outside the hotel's entrance, where the March wind cut through her thin cocktail dress like knives. The valets pretended not to notice the crying pregnant woman standing alone under the awning, her mascara running, her shoes still sticky with champagne. Elena pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. The screen showed dozens of missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize, probably reporters who'd somehow gotten wind of the drama. Her social media was already exploding with posts from people at the gala, photos of her signing the divorce papers, speculation about what she'd done to deserve such public humiliation. But there was one number she hadn't called in 7 years. One number she'd memorized but never dialed because calling it would mean admitting she'd made a mistake. Admitting she'd run away from her real life for a fantasy that had just been destroyed in the most brutal way possible. Elena wiped her eyes, straightened her spine despite the aching weight of her belly, and dialed. It rang once, twice. Then a voice answered, deep, familiar, tinged with an accent she'd spent years trying to hide. "Sestrichka," her brother said softly. "Little sister, I've been waiting for your call." Elena's voice came out steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "Dmitri, it's time. Activate Protocol Volkov." The silence on the other end was profound. Then, "Everything?" "Everything," Elena confirmed, watching a taxi pull up to discharge more guests for Marcus's celebration. "I want him to understand exactly who he just declared war on." "Consider it done," Dmitri replied. "And Elena, welcome home." As Elena ended the call, she felt something shift in her chest. The grief and humiliation transforming into something colder, harder, more purposeful. Marcus Chen thought he'd destroyed her tonight. He thought he'd stripped her of everything that mattered. He had no idea that Elena Chen had never really existed, and Elena Volkov was just getting started. The penthouse suite at the Ritz-Carlton felt like a sanctuary after the brutality of the Four Seasons ballroom. Elena stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city lights blur through her tears, while her brother's private security team swept the rooms for any surveillance devices. Old habits from a childhood spent in corporate warfare. Dmitri Volkov arrived 23 minutes after her call, which meant he'd been in the city the entire time. Watching. Waiting. Protecting his little sister from the shadows while she played at being someone ordinary. He filled the doorway with the kind of presence that made seasoned CEOs step back instinctively. 6'3" of controlled power in a charcoal Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly salary had been. At 40, Dmitri had inherited their father's ice-blue eyes and their mother's ruthless business instincts, combining them into something that had made Volkov Enterprises one of the most feared names in international tech acquisition. "Lenochka," he said softly, using the diminutive from their childhood. His accent was subtle but unmistakable. Moscow layered beneath years of international boarding schools and Ivy League education. Elena turned from the window, and whatever composure she'd been clinging to shattered completely. Dmitri crossed the room in 3 strides and caught her as her knees gave out, holding her while 7 years of loneliness and pretending and trying to be someone she wasn't poured out in racking sobs. "I was so stupid," she choked out against his shoulder. "You told me. Papa told me. Even Mama said marrying him was a mistake, but I thought if I could just be normal. If I could just be Elena Chen instead of Elena Volkov." "Shh." Dmitri guided her to the suite's leather sofa, his movements gentle despite his intimidating size. "You weren't stupid. You were young and in love and tired of being treated like a corporate asset instead of a person. I understood then, and I understand now." A woman in her 50s entered from the bedroom, medical bag in hand. Dr. Irina Kozlov had been the Volkov family physician for 20 years, and she delivered Elena's emergency call with the same unflappable efficiency she brought to everything. "Your blood pressure is elevated," Dr. Kozlov said after examining Elena, her tone professionally concerned. "Not dangerously so, but given your gestational age, we need to monitor it closely. The stress from tonight could trigger early labor." "The baby," Elena's hand flew to her belly, "is fine for now. Strong heartbeat, good movement." Dr. Kozlov packed away her equipment. "But Elena, you cannot sustain this level of stress. Your body is already working overtime to prepare for delivery, adding emotional trauma on top of it. She shook her head. I'm prescribing bed rest for the next 48 hours, minimum. After Dr. Kozlov left with instructions to call immediately if anything changed, Dmitri poured his sister a glass of mineral water and settled into the opposite chair. His phone had been buzzing constantly, but he'd ignored it with the singular focus he brought to everything that mattered. Tell me what you want, he said quietly. Not what you think you should want. Not what's strategic or smart. Tell me what your heart needs, and I'll make it happen. Elena sipped the water, her mind still reeling from the whiplash of the evening. 2 hours ago, she'd been Elena Chen, fired marketing analyst with no money and no home. Now, she was Elena Volkov again, with resources that made Marcus's entire net worth look like a rounding error. I want him to understand, she said finally. I want Marcus to know exactly who he humiliated tonight. I want him to see what he threw away when he chose Vanessa and her lies over his wife and child. Done. Dmitri pulled out his phone, his fingers moving with practiced speed. The team has been prepared for this scenario for 6 months, ever since you told me about his affair with the Lee woman. Elena's head snapped up. You knew about Vanessa? Sestrichka, I've had investigators monitoring your husband since the day you married him. Dmitri's expression was apologetic but unapologetic. You asked me to stay out of your life, and I respected that. But I never stopped protecting you. Our security team has documented every hotel room Marcus has rented, every expensive gift he's bought her with money that should have gone to your household, every lie he's told about working late. He swiped through his phone and turned the screen toward Elena. Security footage played in high definition. Marcus and Vanessa in his office after hours. Their bodies intertwined on the desk where Elena used to leave him homemade lunches. The timestamp showed it was from 3 months ago, when Elena had been 6 months pregnant and Marcus had claimed he was working on a critical product launch. There are hours of this, Dmitri said, his voice carefully neutral. From his office, from hotels, from the apartment he rented for her in Tribeca. Everything documented, everything admissible in court, everything perfectly legal under surveillance laws, given that he was using company resources for the affair. Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. How long have you been watching? Since your first anniversary, when Papa died and you refused to come home for the funeral. Dmitri's jaw tightened at the memory. You asked me to respect your choice to live as Elena Chen. I did. But I made sure that if you ever needed me, I'd have everything required to protect you. Their father's funeral. Elena had been so deep into her new identity by then, so committed to proving she could make it without the Volkov name, that she'd told Marcus her father was just some businessman she'd been estranged from. She hadn't mentioned that Alexei Volkov's funeral had shut down the Moscow Stock Exchange for a day of mourning, that heads of state had sent condolences, that his death had been front-page news across 3 continents. Marcus never even asked, she whispered. When I said my father died, he just nodded and went back to checking his email. He never asked what happened, never asked if I was okay, never questioned why I wasn't going to the funeral. Because he never saw you as a full person, Dmitri replied. He saw you as an accessory to his life. Convenient when you were useful, disposable when you weren't. Elena's phone buzzed with incoming messages. Against her better judgment, she checked them. The first was from her former assistant, Sarah, who'd been one of the few people at Chen Digital Solutions who'd treated her with basic kindness. I'm so sorry about tonight. For what it's worth, everyone knows Vanessa is lying about doing your work. Marcus is just too blinded by her to see it. Be careful. I overheard her telling someone she's going to make sure you can't work anywhere in the industry again. The next messages were from reporters requesting interviews, industry contacts asking if the rumors were true, and, most cutting, several people she'd considered friends offering sympathy that felt more like schadenfreude. But the last message made Elena's blood run cold. It was from Marcus, sent an hour ago. Since you've left the premises without retrieving any company property, I'm having it wipe your laptop and phone access immediately. Consider this your formal notice that any attempt to use proprietary information or trade secrets will result in legal action. Also, my attorney advises that your pregnancy doesn't entitle you to special treatment in the divorce settlement. Expect to hear from them regarding custody arrangements. Supervised visits only given your obvious emotional instability. M. He's threatening me, Elena said, her voice shaking with fury rather than fear now. He's actually threatening to take my baby. Dmitri read the message over her shoulder, and his expression went absolutely arctic. He has no idea what he's just done. What do you mean? Every threat he makes, every aggressive move, every documented cruelty, it all helps our case. Dmitri stood and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back in a posture Elena recognized from their father. But more than that, he's given us legal justification for what comes next. Which is? Dmitri turned back to face her, and Elena saw the predator beneath the protective brother. Marcus Chen thinks he's untouchable. He thinks his company, his reputation, his precious vision for Chen Digital Solutions makes him invincible. He's about to learn that he's been a very small fish in a very large pond. He pulled up something on his tablet and set it on the coffee table in front of Elena. Financial documents, corporate structures, shareholder agreements, all bearing the letterhead of Volkov Enterprises. Remember the deal I told you about 3 months ago? Dmitri asked. The $7 billion acquisition of a major tech sector that was supposed to close this quarter? Elena nodded slowly, her mind starting to connect pieces she'd deliberately kept separate. You said it was a hostile takeover of multiple companies, that you were consolidating the market. Chen Digital Solutions is one of those companies. Dmitri's smile was sharp enough to cut. Along with his 3 largest competitors, his top 5 client companies, and the venture capital firm that holds his outstanding debt. We've been buying up pieces of his empire for 18 months, moving through shell corporations and international investment funds that can't be traced back to Volkov Enterprises. The implications crashed over Elena like a tidal wave. You own Marcus's company. Not yet. But by the end of this week, Volkov Enterprises will control 67% of the market share in Marcus's sector. His company will be worthless unless it joins our consolidation. And the acquisition terms, Dmitri pulled up another document, specifically state that current leadership will be replaced with Volkov appointees. You're going to fire him, Elena said softly. I'm going to give him the same choice he gave you. Sign over control, or watch everything he's built collapse around him. Dmitri sat back down, his expression serious. But, Lenoshka, I need you to be certain. Once we start this, there's no going back. Marcus will know who you really are. Your identity as Elena Chen will be destroyed completely. Everyone will know you're Elena Volkov, daughter of Alexei Volkov, sister of Dmitri Volkov, and board member of one of the most powerful tech conglomerates in the world. Elena looked down at her hands, at the simple wedding band Marcus had given her 7 years ago. White gold, small diamond, chosen because he'd said he was saving up for something better when his company became more successful. She twisted it off her finger and set it on the table. Elena Chen was a fantasy. she said quietly. I thought I could escape who I was born to be. Thought I could find love and happiness by pretending to be ordinary. But Marcus never loved Elena Chen. He loved having someone who made him feel important, who didn't threaten his ego, who he could control. She looked up at her brother, and Dmitri saw their father's steel in her green eyes. I want him to know. I want Marcus to wake up tomorrow and discover that the woman he fired tonight, the woman he humiliated in front of 200 people, the woman he threw away like garbage, I want him to discover she's the one who owns his entire future. Dmitri nodded once, sharply, and picked up his phone. Then it's time to remind the world who you really are. He made 3 calls in rapid succession, each one brief and coded. Elena recognized the pattern from childhood. Her brother activating teams that had been on standby, setting machinery in motion that had been carefully positioned over months or years, executing plans that had been war-gamed to anticipate every possible response. Victor is handling the PR rollout, Dmitri said after the last call. By morning, every major business publication will have the story. Elena Volkov returns from 7-year absence, takes active role in 7B Ballard tech consolidation. Your photo will be everywhere, along with your credentials, your position on the Volkov Enterprises board, and a carefully worded statement about looking forward to reshaping the tech industry. What about Marcus? His board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow at 9 a.m. He'll arrive to find several of his investors have sold their shares overnight to an undisclosed buyer. Dmitri's smile was predatory. By noon, he'll discover that buyer was a Volkov subsidiary. By 2 p.m., he'll receive a formal acquisition offer. By 5 p.m., when he's inevitably rejected it, he'll watch his stock price collapse as our other holdings move to edge him out of the market. And Vanessa? Ah, yes, the delightful Miss Lee. Dmitri pulled up another file. Our investigators found something interesting about her. The pregnancy she's been hinting at? Completely fabricated. She's been wearing subtle padding and talking about morning sickness. But according to her gynecologist's records, which we obtained perfectly legally through a data breach the doctor's office suffered last month, she's not pregnant. In fact, she had an IUD inserted 6 months ago. Elena felt a savage satisfaction at the confirmation of what she'd already suspected. Vanessa had been playing Marcus with the oldest trick in the book, using a fake pregnancy to lock him down the same way she'd accused Elena of doing. I want him to find out about that on his own, Elena said. I want Marcus to discover he left his pregnant wife for a woman who was lying about being pregnant. The irony is too perfect. A contraction rippled across Elena's belly. Not painful yet, but noticeable. Dr. Kozlov had warned this might happen, the stress triggering Braxton Hicks contractions as her body prepared for actual labor. You need to rest, Dmitri said, seeing her wince. Tomorrow is going to be intense, and you need your strength. Tomorrow, Elena repeated, the word tasting like a promise and a threat. Tomorrow, Marcus Chen wakes up to discover he's declared war on the Volkov family. Tomorrow, Dmitri confirmed, we show him exactly how badly he miscalculated. As her brother left to coordinate with their teams, Elena lay back against the sofa cushions, one hand on her belly where her daughter was still kicking with what felt like righteous fury. Her phone continued buzzing with messages from people who thought they were kicking her while she was down, offering false sympathy or genuine schadenfreude about her very public humiliation. Let them talk, Elena thought. Let them enjoy their gossip and speculation for one more night. By tomorrow, everyone would understand that the woman Marcus Chen had thrown away wasn't a victim. She was a Volkov, and Volkov's never forgot. They simply waited until the moment was perfect to strike. Marcus Chen woke up at 6:47 a.m. in the master bedroom of his Tribeca penthouse. Vanessa's blonde hair spread across the pillow beside him like a crown. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a space that had cost him $3.8 million and represented everything he'd worked for: success, status, the life he deserved. Last night's gala had been perfect. The standing ovation after his quarterly results announcement. The congratulations from investors. Vanessa's radiant smile when he'd slipped the engagement ring onto her finger in front of everyone who mattered. Even the Elena situation had been handled cleanly. No mess, no drawn-out drama, just a surgical extraction of a problem that had been dragging him down for months. His phone showed 43 notifications. Marcus smiled, expecting congratulatory messages about the engagement and the strong quarterly results. Instead, the first email made his stomach clench. From Robert Sterling, Sterling Capital Ventures. Subject: Emergency board meeting required. Marcus, we need to convene an emergency session this morning. Several concerning developments overnight. Call me immediately. Marcus sat up, careful not to wake Vanessa. Sterling Capital was Chen Digital Solutions' largest investor, holding 22% of the company. Robert Sterling didn't send emails at 6:30 a.m. unless something was seriously wrong. The next email was from his CFO, Dennis Park. From Dennis Park, subject: Urgent. Stock movement, boss, you need to see this. Someone bought Morrison Holdings' entire stake in CDS overnight. 8% of the company just changed hands to an LLC we can't trace. I've never seen a transaction move this fast. Call me. Marcus's mouth went dry. Morrison Holdings had been one of his most stable investors, a venture capital firm that had backed him since Series B funding 3 years ago. They'd never indicated any interest in selling. He scrolled through more emails, each one worse than the last. 3 more investors had sold their stakes overnight to various LLCs and offshore investment vehicles. His legal team had sent a red-flagged message about irregularities in the transfers. His head of business development reported that 2 major clients had requested emergency calls to discuss the relationship going forward. By the time Marcus reached the bottom of his inbox, he'd lost track of how many fires were suddenly burning. This couldn't be coincidence. This was coordinated. Morning, handsome. Vanessa stretched languidly, the diamond engagement ring catching the light. How does it feel to be an engaged man? Something's wrong, Marcus said, already pulling up his stock portfolio. Chen Digital Solutions' share price had dropped 7% in pre-market trading. Something's very wrong. Vanessa sat up, her expression shifting to concern that looked practiced. What do you mean? Investors are selling. I don't know why or to whom, but someone's buying up stakes in my company. Marcus was already dialing Robert Sterling, his mind racing through possibilities. Hostile takeover attempt? Competitor trying to gain leverage? Corporate raider looking to asset strip? Robert Sterling answered on the first ring. Marcus, good, you're up. We have a serious problem. What happened? What happened is that someone with very deep pockets and very good lawyers spent last night systematically acquiring minority stakes in Chen Digital Solutions through channels I've never seen before. Sterling's voice was tight with controlled panic. I got calls from 4 other VC firms at 5 a.m. We all sold to different entities, but the paperwork all came through the same law firm, Volkov, Harrison and Associates out of New York. The name meant nothing to Marcus. I've never heard of them. Neither had I, which is concerning. When I tried to research them this morning, all I found was a corporate website with minimal information and a list of international clients that reads like a who's who of Fortune 500 companies. Sterling paused. Marcus, Someone is positioning for a takeover, and they're doing it with the kind of resources that suggest this isn't just business. This feels personal. Marcus's mind immediately went to competitors. TechCorp's CEO, who'd lost a major client to Chen Digital last year, the startup founder he'd publicly mocked at a conference, even his former business partner who'd left after a bitter disagreement about company direction. "I'll handle it," Marcus said with more confidence than he felt. "Emergency board meeting at 9 a.m. We'll figure out who's behind this and shut it down." After hanging up, Marcus found Vanessa scrolling through her phone, her expression troubled. "Marcus, have you seen the news?" "What news?" She turned her phone to show him a Bloomberg headline that had posted 20 minutes ago. "Volkov Enterprises announces 7B tech sector consolidation. Russian-American conglomerate makes aggressive move into U.S. market." Marcus skimmed the article, his confusion growing. Volkov Enterprises was a massive player in international tech. But they'd never shown interest in his sector before. The article mentioned that Elena Volkov, daughter of late founder Alexei Volkov and current board member, would be taking an active role in the acquisition strategy. "Why does that matter to us?" Marcus asked. "Because look at this." Vanessa pulled up another article, this one from TechCrunch. "The prodigal daughter returns. Elena Volkov emerges from 7-year absence." The photo accompanying the article made Marcus's breath stop. It showed a woman in an elegant black suit standing next to a man identified as Dmitry Volkov, CEO of Volkov Enterprises. But Marcus's eyes were locked on the woman's face. High cheekbones, intelligent green eyes, auburn hair pulled back in a sophisticated style that emphasized features he'd somehow never noticed before. Elena. His Elena. Except the caption identified her as Elena Volkov, age 32, heir to the Volkov fortune and one of the most influential women in international technology, despite her years away from the public eye. "That can't be right," Marcus whispered. "Elena's maiden name was Chen. She told me her family was in business. But nothing like—" "Keep reading," Vanessa interrupted, her voice strange. "Elena Volkov disappeared from public life 7 years ago, reportedly to pursue a normal life away from the intense scrutiny that comes with being part of one of the world's wealthiest families. Sources close to the family suggest her return signals a major shift in Volkov Enterprises' strategy, with Elena bringing fresh perspective to their aggressive expansion into new markets. My sister has always had impeccable instincts, Dmitry Volkov said in a statement. She spent the past 7 years gaining ground-level experience in the tech industry. Now she's ready to help reshape it from the top. The article continued with background on the Volkov family. Annual revenue of $127 billion, operations in 43 countries, a reputation for ruthless efficiency in acquisitions, and a particular talent for identifying undervalued assets and exploiting them. Marcus's phone rang. His attorney, Mitchell Stevens. Have you seen the news about Volkov Enterprises? Mitchell asked without preamble. I'm looking at it now, but I don't understand what this has to do with Marcus, the law firm handling those mysterious stock purchases? Volkov, Harrison and Associates? It's the Volkov family's in-house legal team. Mitchell's voice dropped. And I just received a very interesting email from them. They're requesting a meeting with you today to discuss acquisition opportunities and strategic partnerships. This is a hostile takeover setup, Marcus. And if the Volkovs are behind it, you're in serious trouble. After Mitchell hung up, Marcus stared at the photo of Elena Volkov, trying to reconcile this poised, powerful woman with the frumpy, pregnant wife he'd humiliated last night. It couldn't be the same person. Elena Chen had been nobody. A mid-level marketing analyst with no connections, no money, no power. but the eyes in the photo were unmistakable. And the more Marcus looked, the more he saw similarities in the bone structure, the shape of her mouth, the way she held herself with a confidence he'd never noticed when she was his wife. "Marcus," Vanessa said carefully, "please tell me your wife isn't Elena Volkov." "Ex-wife," Marcus corrected automatically. "As of last night. And she can't be. Elena never said anything about—" His phone exploded with incoming calls. Board members, investors, his executive team, reporters somehow already sniffing out a connection between last night's very public divorce and this morning's bombshell revelation. Marcus answered the call from his CFO. "Dennis, talk to me." "It's worse than we thought." Dennis sounded like he'd been running. "I've been tracing the ownership changes overnight. The entities that bought our investors' stakes, they're all ultimately controlled by Volkov Enterprises through a web of subsidiaries and holding companies. Marcus, they now own 31% of Chen Digital Solutions. 31%. The number hit like a physical blow. 31% wasn't controlling interest, but it was enough to block major decisions, enough to force Marcus to negotiate, enough to make his life absolutely miserable if they wanted to. How is that possible? Those transactions should have triggered regulatory reviews, should have— They structured it perfectly, Dennis interrupted. Each individual purchase was small enough to fly under the radar. It's only when you aggregate them all that you see the full picture. And Marcus? The paperwork was filed last night at 11:47 p.m. Whoever orchestrated this had everything ready to go the moment you— He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The moment you humiliated your wife at the gala. The moment you served her with divorce papers in front of everyone. The moment you thought you'd won. Marcus looked at Vanessa, who was staring at her phone with an expression he'd never seen before. Genuine fear. "What?" he demanded. "Social media," she whispered. "People are connecting the dots. Someone posted photos from last night's gala next to this morning's articles about Elena Volkov. They're realizing that the pregnant woman you fired and divorced in front of everyone is the heir to a $127 billion empire." She turned her phone to show him Twitter, where #Elena Volkov was already trending. The top tweets were brutal. "Imagine being dumb enough to divorce Elena Volkov while she's pregnant with your child. Marcus Chen just made the worst business decision in history. That moment when you fire your wife from her $60K job and she reveals she's worth more than your entire company. Elena Volkov had karma's real. Marcus Chen serving divorce papers to a Volkov at a company party is the most spectacular self-destruction I've ever witnessed. Get the popcorn ready." Marcus's hands were shaking. This couldn't be happening. 24 hours ago, he'd been on top of the world. Successful CEO, beautiful fiancé, freedom from the burden of an unwanted wife and child. Now he was watching his carefully constructed life collapse in real time. His phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed an international number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Chen?" A woman's voice, crisp and professional. "This is Natasha Volkova calling on behalf of Elena Volkov. Ms. Volkov would like to schedule a meeting with you this afternoon at 2 p.m. to discuss the future of Chen Digital Solutions. Will you be available?" Marcus wanted to refuse, to rage, to demand explanations. But he was a businessman first, and he recognized a power play when he saw one. Refusing the meeting would only make him look weak and scared. "I'll be available," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "Excellent. Ms. Volkov will meet you at the Volkov Enterprises offices, 47th floor of the Sterling Building. Please come alone." The woman paused. "Oh, And Mr. Chen? Ms. Volkov asked me to remind you that she's still 8 months pregnant with your child. She hopes you'll consider that when determining how aggressively you wish to negotiate. The line went dead. Vanessa was already out of bed, pacing the bedroom in one of Marcus's shirts. This is bad, Marcus. This is really, really bad. I know that, he snapped. I'm trying to think. Think about what? The woman you publicly humiliated last night turns out to be worth more than God. And now her family is systematically taking apart your company. There's nothing to think about. We're screwed. Marcus's mind raced through options. He could go to the press, claim Elena had deceived him about her identity, paint himself as the victim of a gold-digging scheme in reverse. But no. That story would make him look even worse, admitting he'd never bothered to learn anything real about his wife's background. He could lawyer up, fight the acquisition on antitrust grounds, drag it out in courts for years. But the Volkovs had resources that made his legal budget look like pocket change, and they clearly had no problem playing dirty, or he could meet with Elena and try to negotiate some kind of settlement that let him save face and keep his company. The last option felt like swallowing poison, but it was the only one that didn't guarantee complete destruction. I need to prepare for this meeting, Marcus said, already mentally cataloging what leverage he might still have. Vanessa, I need you to... Actually, Vanessa interrupted, her voice taking on a tone Marcus had never heard before, calculation mixed with self-preservation. I think maybe we should slow down on the engagement announcement. Marcus stared at her. What? Just temporarily, Vanessa said quickly, though her eyes were already planning her exit. Until you get this situation with Elena handled. The optics of being engaged to me while fighting your pregnant ex-wife who's also a billionaire. Marcus, it makes you look terrible. It makes us both look terrible. You're backing out. Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. Last night you were celebrating our engagement, and now you're... I'm being practical, Vanessa shot back. Something you should have been before you decided to publicly humiliate one of the most powerful women in international business. Did it ever occur to you to, I don't know, Google your wife's maiden name? To ask literally any questions about her background? The accusation stung because it was true. Marcus had never questioned Elena's vague explanations about her family, had never pushed when she changed the subject, had never wondered why a woman with an Ivy League education and obvious intelligence was content with a mid-level corporate job. He'd been so convinced of his own superiority, so certain that Elena was lucky to be with him, that he'd never considered she might be hiding something extraordinary. Get out, Marcus said quietly. Marcus, get out! He was shouting now, 7 years of careful control shattering. You wanted to destroy Elena last night, wanted to make her look pathetic and weak. You said she was trying to trap me with a pregnancy. You said, I said what you wanted to hear, Vanessa interrupted coldly. Don't pretend this was all my idea, Marcus. You wanted her gone, and I helped you get rid of her. But I'm not going down with your ship. She was already gathering her things, the engagement ring conspicuously absent from her finger. Marcus watched her dress with efficient movements, transforming from the vulnerable fiancé back into the calculating business development director who'd seduced him in the first place. Oh. And Marcus? Vanessa paused at the bedroom door. About the pregnancy I mentioned last month? I need to be honest with you about something. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Don't tell me. I'm not pregnant. Never was. She smiled, and it was the most honest expression he'd ever seen from her. I just thought the possibility would make you more committed to leaving Elena. Worked pretty well, didn't it? Then she was gone, her heels clicking across the hardwood floor, the front door closing with a finality that echoed through the empty penthouse. Marcus sank onto the bed, his phone still buzzing with crisis calls he didn't have the energy to answer. In the span of 12 hours, he'd lost his wife, his fiancée, his company's stability, and quite possibly his entire future. And all because he'd underestimated the quiet, pregnant woman who'd loved him enough to hide who she really was for 7 years. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Bring the divorce papers to our meeting this afternoon. We'll need to discuss some revisions." Marcus looked at the papers he'd forced Elena to sign last night, now sitting on his nightstand like a ticking bomb. He'd thought signing them was the end of their marriage, the final severing of a tie that had been holding him back. Instead, it seemed to have been the beginning of something far worse. A war he couldn't win against an opponent he'd never even known existed. The Sterling Building occupied an entire block of Midtown Manhattan, 68 floors of steel and glass that made Marcus's company headquarters look like a suburban office park. He arrived at 1:45 p.m., 15 minutes early because showing up late to Elena Volkov would be professional suicide. The lobby was all marble and understated wealth, the kind that didn't need to announce itself because everyone already knew. Security guards in tailored suits checked his ID with the thoroughness of Secret Service agents, and Marcus was directed to a private elevator that required a key card to access the executive floors. The elevator ride to the 47th floor felt like ascending to judgment. Marcus had spent the morning in emergency meetings with his board, all of whom had the same message: cooperate with the Volkovs or watch the company collapse. His stock price had dropped another 12% since opening, and 3 major clients had called to reassess their relationships after news broke about his connection to Elena Volkov. The market had spoken. Marcus Chen had declared war on the wrong family. The elevator doors opened onto a reception area that could have doubled as a modern art museum. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of Central Park, and the furniture probably cost more than Marcus's car. A receptionist who looked like she'd stepped off a Milan runway smiled with professional warmth. "Mr. Chen, Ms. Volkov is expecting you. Conference room A, straight ahead." Marcus walked down a corridor lined with photos of Volkov Enterprises' achievements. Factories in Shanghai, data centers in Stockholm, the Moscow headquarters that looked like something from a science fiction movie. Each photo was a reminder of the scale he was dealing with, the resources that dwarfed his own by orders of magnitude. Conference room A was empty when he arrived, giving Marcus time to catalog potential tactical advantages. The room was designed for intimidation. A glass table that seated 20, walls covered in digital displays showing real-time data from global markets. And at the head of the table, a single chair that commanded the entire space. That chair was currently occupied by a man who could only be Dmitry Volkov. "Mr. Chen." Dmitry stood, extending a hand that Marcus shook reflexively. The man's grip was firm without being aggressive, controlled without being weak. "Thank you for coming. My sister will join us shortly. She's just finishing a call with our Tokyo office." "Your sister," Marcus said carefully, testing the waters. "I'm still having trouble processing that Elena is your sister. She never mentioned that she's a Volkov?" Dmitry's smile was cold. "No, I don't imagine she did. Elena wanted to see if someone could love her for herself rather than her family's name and fortune. You answered that question quite definitively last night." Before Marcus could respond, the conference room door opened. Elena entered, and Marcus felt his breath catch. This wasn't the tired, frumpy, pregnant woman he'd humiliated at the gala. This was someone completely different. Or perhaps this was who Elena had always been, underneath the camouflage of being ordinary. She wore a charcoal Armani maternity suit that somehow made her 8-month pregnancy look powerful rather than vulnerable. Her auburn hair was styled in a sleek updo that emphasized her bone structure, and she wore minimal jewelry, except for a platinum watch that probably cost 6 figures. But it was her eyes that stopped Marcus cold. Those green eyes that used to look at him with love now held something that felt like pity mixed with steel. "Hello, Marcus." Her voice was the same, but the accent was different. Subtle traces of Moscow under the American English, inflections he'd never noticed before. "Thank you for coming." "Elena, Marcus stood, unsure whether to approach her, to apologize, to demand explanations. "I don't understand what's happening." "Sit down, Marcus." It wasn't a request. Elena settled into the chair at the head of the table with practiced grace, Dmitri taking the seat to her right. "We have a great deal to discuss, and I'd prefer to be efficient about it. My doctor wants me on bed rest, and I'm already pushing my limits by being here." Marcus sat, feeling distinctly like a student called to the principal's office. On the table in front of Elena was a leather portfolio, and she opened it with deliberate slowness. "Let's start with the basics," Elena said. "Chen Digital Solutions currently has a market valuation of approximately $200 million. Your annual revenue is $47 million with a net profit margin of 11%. You have 312 employees, offices in 3 cities, and contracts with 47 major clients." She recited the numbers from memory without glancing at notes. Marcus felt his stomach sink as he realized she knew his company better than he did. "Over the past 18 months, Elena continued, Volkov Enterprises has been quietly acquiring strategic positions in your industry. We now control majority stakes in 3 of your largest competitors, significant investments in 12 of your top clients, and as of this morning, 31% of Chen Digital Solutions itself." Dmitri pulled up a presentation on the wall screens. A corporate structure chart that showed Chen Digital Solutions as a tiny node in a vast web of Volkov holdings. Red lines connected Marcus's company to dozens of entities, each one ultimately tracing back to Volkov Enterprises. "This is insane," Marcus said. "You've been planning this for over a year? While we were married?" "No, Marcus." Elena's voice was quiet but firm. "While we were married, I was trying to be Elena Chen. Ordinary marketing analyst, supportive wife, woman who loved you enough to abandon everything she was born to be. My family was planning this without my knowledge because they understood something I refused to see." "Which was?" "That you would eventually show your true nature. That you would prove yourself to be exactly the kind of man who views people as assets to be acquired or liabilities to be eliminated." Elena's hand moved to rest on her belly. "My brother started positioning for a hostile acquisition the day after our first anniversary, when I refused to come home for our father's funeral. He knew that anyone who could keep me away from my family's darkest moment was someone who didn't deserve the protection of the Volkov name." Marcus remembered that funeral. He'd been annoyed that Elena wanted to take time off work for some family thing, had convinced her that staying to help with a product launch was more important. He'd never asked about her father's death, never questioned why she'd cried in the bathroom for hours after making the call to tell her family she wasn't coming. "I didn't know," Marcus said weakly. "You didn't care." Elena's correction was surgical. "There's a difference, Marcus. You had 7 years to ask me about my family, my background, my life before you. You never did because my history was irrelevant to you. I was convenient. Someone who made you feel important without challenging your ego. When I stopped being convenient, you discarded me. She pulled a document from her portfolio and slid it across the glass table. Marcus recognized his own company's quarterly projections, except these had been annotated with notes in Russian. "We've analyzed Chen Digital Solutions extensively," Dmitry interjected. "Your company has potential, but it's been mismanaged. You've prioritized vanity metrics over sustainable growth, flashy acquisitions over organic development, and personal enrichment over long-term strategy." "That's not true. You spent $1.2 million in company funds last year on private jet travel, luxury hotels, and entertainment expenses that had nothing to do with business development," Elena said flatly. "Meanwhile, you cut your engineering team's budget by 15% and delayed essential infrastructure upgrades. You've been running Chen Digital Solutions like your personal piggy bank, Marcus. And it shows in your declining margins and increasing debt load." Marcus felt heat flood his face. Those were legitimate business expenses, including the $60,000 in jewelry purchased for Vanessa Lai. Elena raised an eyebrow. Jewelry that was expensed as client gifts, despite there being no corresponding client records? Or the Tribeca apartment you rented for her, listed as temporary corporate housing even though your company has no operations in that neighborhood? The precision of her knowledge was terrifying. Every financial irregularity, every creative accounting decision, every corner Marcus had cut, Elena had documentation. "We're not here to prosecute your past crimes," Dmitry said, though the word crimes hung in the air with deliberate weight. "We're here to offer you options." Elena pulled out another document. Option 1. Volkov Enterprises acquires Chen Digital Solutions for fair market value. You step down as CEO, accept a consulting role with a generous severance package, and walk away with approximately $40 million. Your employees keep their jobs, your clients maintain continuity, and you avoid the legal complications that would arise from a deeper investigation into your financial practices. You want me to sell you my company? We want to acquire an asset that's currently underperforming because of poor leadership, Elena corrected. The company will be folded into our tech consolidation, given proper resources and management, and positioned to actually achieve its potential. Marcus's hands clenched into fists under the table. "And if I refuse?" "Option 2, Elena said calmly, "is that you fight us. You refuse the acquisition, mobilize your board, try to find white knight investors to block our takeover attempt. This will take approximately 6 to 8 months, during which time we will systematically poach your top talent, undercut your pricing to steal your clients, and encourage your remaining investors to bail before the stock becomes worthless." Dmitry pulled up another slide showing projected timelines. By month 3, your revenue will have dropped 40%. By month 6, you'll be facing multiple lawsuits from investors who discovered your financial irregularities. By month 8, Chen Digital Solutions will file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy and will acquire the assets for pennies on the dollar. "You can't, we can, and we will," Elena interrupted. "Marcus, you declared war on my family when you humiliated me last night. Not intentionally. You had no idea who I was. But ignorance doesn't change the reality. You threw away a Volkov, and Volkovs don't forget. We simply wait until the moment is perfect to strike." Marcus looked between Elena and her brother, seeing the family resemblance clearly now. The same sharp intelligence, the same controlled intensity, the same absolute certainty that they held all the cards. "This is extortion." "This is business," Dmitry replied. "The same business you claimed to understand so well. You wanted to play in the major leagues, Marcus. Welcome. These are the rules." Elena shifted in her chair, a slight wince crossing her face before she controlled it. Marcus noticed, of course he noticed, and felt an unwelcome surge of concern for the child she was carrying. His child, regardless of everything else. "Are you all right?" The question came out before he could stop it. "I'm fine," Elena said, though her hand pressed against her belly. Braxton Hicks contractions. Stress-induced, according to my doctor. She strongly advised against this meeting, but I insisted on being here to deliver this message personally. "Elena, you should—" "Don't." Her voice cut like glass. "Don't pretend to care about my well-being now, Marcus. Last night you called our baby a personal complication and threatened to seek supervised custody only. You made your feelings about this pregnancy abundantly clear." Marcus remembered his text message from last night, the threats about custody and emotional instability. They'd seemed justified at the time. Elena had been crying, unstable, hysterical. Now he understood he'd been threatening legal action against a woman whose family could buy and sell the entire American court system. "I want to revise the divorce settlement," Elena said, pulling out the papers Marcus had forced her to sign. "These terms were negotiated under false pretenses. You presented yourself as the sole provider, the one with all the resources and power. You're neither." She produced a red pen and began marking up the documents with quick, precise strokes. "First, custody. We'll have joint legal custody with a 60-40 split favoring me until our daughter is school age, then moving to 50-50. You'll have reasonable visitation rights contingent on completing parenting classes and maintaining appropriate housing." "Parenting classes?" Marcus bristled at the implication. "You've demonstrated no knowledge of child development, no preparation for fatherhood, and no interest in our daughter beyond using her as a bargaining chip." Elena didn't look up from the papers. "Yes, Marcus. Parenting classes. If you want to be part of her life, you'll learn how to actually be a father." She continued marking. "Second, child support. Given your actual financial situation versus my family's resources, the standard calculation would be negligible. However, you'll contribute $5,000 monthly to demonstrate financial responsibility and commitment. That's more than the legal requirement. Yes. Consider it character building." Elena moved to the next section. "Third, the house. It's being sold, as you indicated. Proceeds will be split 50-50, which is generous given that I provided the down payment from a trust fund you knew nothing about." Marcus had forgotten that detail. 3 years ago, Elena had suddenly produced $200,000 in cash for their house, claiming it was from an inheritance from a distant relative. He'd been too excited about upgrading their lifestyle to question the source. "Fourth, and most important," Elena said, her pen pausing over the final section, "there will be a non-disparagement clause. You will not discuss our marriage, our divorce, or my family with the press. You will not portray yourself as a victim. You will not use our daughter as a prop to rehabilitate your public image." "You can't control what I say." "I can, and I will." Elena finally looked up, her green eyes absolutely glacial. "Violate the non-disparagement clause, and I'll release every piece of documentation we have about your financial crimes, your affair, and your systematic deception of investors and employees. You'll spend the next decade fighting criminal charges while your reputation is destroyed beyond repair." Dmitri leaned forward. "Sign the revised settlement, Marcus. Accept our acquisition offer. Walk away with your money and what's left of your dignity. Or fight us and lose everything, including your freedom." The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus looked at the marked-up divorce papers, at the acquisition documents, at the trap closing around him with perfect precision. Everything he'd built, Everything he'd worked for, everything he'd sacrificed, all of it dependent on the mercy of a woman he'd thrown away, like garbage. "I need time to think," Marcus said. "You have until Friday," Elena replied. "The acquisition offer expires at close of business. After that, we moved to option 2 and dismantled Chen Digital Solutions, piece by piece." She stood carefully, Dmitri immediately moving to support her elbow. Marcus saw the gesture. Protective, familial, the kind of care he should have been providing all along. "One more thing," Elena said as she reached the conference room door. "Vanessa Lee contacted my office this morning. She's requesting a meeting about potential employment opportunities with Volkov Enterprises Media Division." Marcus's blood ran cold. "You're hiring her?" "I'm considering it. Ms. Lee has valuable insights into corporate culture and competitive intelligence, given her position at Chen Digital. Plus, she's quite forthcoming when speaking with someone who has the resources to verify her claims." Elena's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "Did you know she'd been recording your private conversations for months?" "Insurance policy," she called it. Quite the entrepreneurial spirit. The implications crashed over Marcus like a tsunami. Vanessa had been documenting everything. Every complaint about Elena, every plan to push her out, every cruel word spoken in private. And now she was offering that intelligence to the Volkovs in exchange for career advancement. "She betrayed you too," Marcus said weakly. "No, Marcus. She made a strategic decision to align with power. You taught her that loyalty means nothing compared to self-interest. She learned the lesson well." Elena paused. "Friday, 5 p.m. Choose wisely. Your daughter deserves a father who's smart enough to know when he's lost." After they left, Marcus sat alone in the conference room, surrounded by screens showing Volkov Enterprises' global reach. His phone buzzed with another crisis. His head of engineering had just resigned, already hired away by a Volkov subsidiary with triple his current salary. The dismantling had begun. Marcus pulled out his phone and called his attorney. "Mitchell, I need you to review these acquisition terms. And Mitchell, start preparing bankruptcy contingency plans, just in case." Because Marcus Chen was many things. Arrogant, cruel, blinded by ambition. But he wasn't stupid enough to think he could win a war against the Volkovs. Some battles were over before they even began.